Hello everyone, and thanks once again for joining us for Tuesday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist David Percy. And up first, the first graphic tonight for today's show, flood warning and advisory. First, a flood warning for the Taya River near Skagway, and that's out until 7 p.m. this evening, so a few more hours from now. And at 9 a.m. this morning, the stage was at 16.85 feet. Flood stage is at 16.5 feet, so did rise above flood stage. That's why the warning was out as forecasted. And a steady decrease through the day is occurring and should fall below flood stage. And again, by 7 p.m., that should be it. Or, they'll kick it out longer. But at 16.8 feet, portions of the first few miles of the Chilkoot Trail will begin to inundate with water to ankle depth. And, of course, it goes to 18.5 feet, so I guess if you got rubber boots on, you won't have any problem. And for the flood advisory, for the Mendenhall Valley and Aku Lake in Juneau, that's out until 1 a.m. Wednesday, tonight. And minor flooding of low-lying areas near Aku Lake and Jordan Creek is occurring, and minor flooding around Mendenhall Lake and River is expected Tuesday afternoon. And at 6:29 this morning, minor flooding was observed. So, looking at the hazardous weather graphic, we'll see there's a wind advisory out for the eastern Alaska Range from midnight tonight until 10 a.m. Friday. So it'll be out for a while, a few days anyway, about 2 days maybe. And that's for the eastern Alaska Range and probably west of the Tok Cutoff, looking for south winds to increase to speeds of 25 to 40 miles an hour sustained, with possible gusts to 50 miles per hour. And from there, satellite imagery showing that slow-moving front finally getting nudged to the east. And that put the heaviest rain today over the central panhandle, much lighter amounts up to the north occurring. About only a tenth of an inch falling at Yakutat, say, in the last 12 hours. In fact, beginning to end there. And then farther to the west, eastern North Gulf Coast, you can see some clouds. That's continuing the rain to fall Cordova this afternoon, and areas of rain up into the Copper River Basin. Clouds over the central and eastern interior brought areas of rain and snow today, especially over the more mountainous terrain in the form of snow with any elevation at all. Just rain in the Fairbanks area and Nenana. The temperatures down in the mid to upper 30s this morning, reaching probably the lower 40s this afternoon. But you can see areas of clouds all the way out to the eastern Arctic coast, where temperatures fell into the 20s overnight and this morning. In fact, Anatuvik Pass was down to 12 degrees for an overnight low. And so chilling off up there for the North Slope with east winds, kind of brisk east winds blowing 15 to 25 miles an hour. And so areas of fog and flurries were occurring there, but nothing, no accumulations I saw reported. And then the next system there over the southeast Bering Sea, actually the low center over the eastern Aleutians, now approaching the western Alaska Peninsula of the front. That's spreading some gusty winds and rain into Kodiak Island. Winds really haven't increased that much at Kodiak State Airport, but we're gusting 30 to 40 miles an hour toward Akiak and Sitkinak Island this afternoon, with a little bit more in the way of rain there. And King Salmon seeing gusts to, I think 40 miles an hour at King Salmon, or 35 miles an hour at King Salmon. Pilot Point had east winds gusting to 40 miles an hour. And then on the back side of that, northeast winds 35 miles an hour in the Pueblos, where St. George Island picked up half an inch of precipitation. And otherwise up to the north there, or rainfall amounts in the panhandle with that front shifting eastward again were heaviest over the central areas today. In the last 12 hours, Petersburg picked up an inch of rain and Cake picked up 1.5 inches. But up to the north, Juneau just had 0.03 of an inch of precipitation. And again, some rain occurring there in the Cordova area, beginning to taper off, and then rain and snow showers up in the central interior. But a fair amount of sun, Cook Inlet, especially in the Susitna Valley today with dry conditions, flurries and fog on the Arctic coast. Tonight, Next week's system comes into the far western Aleutians there, but just bringing some light rain and fog into that area. Otherwise, that 984 millibar low moves up into western Bristol Bay with a front, increasing the wind and precipitation, pushing it up into Cook Inlet, southern Kenai Peninsula, eventually gradually shifting northward late tonight, increasing the rain and snow chances over northern Cook Inlet, especially in the Chugach Mountains, western Prince William Sound. Periods of rain over the Kuskokwim Valley, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, breezy conditions as well, but dry up over the north and northeast and eastern interior. Stays dry over the eastern North Gulf Coast. Scattered showers now, that weak trough, mainly over the central and southern panhandle. And then we'll see for tomorrow, that system out west there kind of shears apart with one batch of moisture dropping down to the southeast, hits a split flow there, and another one pulls back to the northwest, virtually gone, replaced by high pressure, which is in advance of the next big storm coming in on Thursday. We'll look at that in a second. Otherwise, that low continues to drift northward just southwest of Cape Newenham. Front pushes into southern Cook Inlet, increasing some gusty winds, especially through Turnagain Arm. Portage example could see gusts maybe 40, 50 miles an hour out of the east. And rain, maybe heavy at times, Portage into Whittier, and looks pretty wet for the Kenai Peninsula. And the upslope areas of the western Alaska Range will see some precipitation, kind of touch and go for the Anchorage area, but there is a possibility of seeing some light rain at times tomorrow, even with the downsloping wind flow. Showers still a chance of along the southeast coast there. Stays dry up over the northern interior, areas of low clouds, fog, maybe some flurries for the Arctic coast. And then we'll see on Thursday that ex-typhoon, another ex-typhoon, and I don't know what the name was, but this is another one of those coming in, deepening quite rapidly, and around 950 millibars tomorrow afternoon, but once it gets into the southwest Bering Sea, it actually drops down to like 938 millibars again, much like the last one. But this appears to take a different course. It will eventually, hopefully, push off to the east and weaken quite rapidly later in the week. But for tomorrow, we've got storm force winds coming into the western Aleutians with gales developing over the central Aleutians. High pressure ridge will make for light winds and nice conditions for the Pribilofs. And from about Atka to the eastern Aleutians, still a chance of showers around Alaska Island. Southern Alaska looks cloudy and occasionally wet, with some rain pushing back into the panhandle with that weakening front, just weakening into a trough now. That'll push rain mainly over the central and northern southeast coast, with showers down to the south. And again, snow flurries, fog, and gusty east winds for the Arctic coast. And for the lows tonight, mid-40s to mid-50s over the panhandle, upper 20s in the Copper River Basin, otherwise mid-30s to mid-40s, upper 40s for Kodiak Island. Highs tomorrow, 50s to lower 60s for the panhandle, warmest in the south as usual. Upper 40s to mid-50s for southern Alaska and Bristol Bay, followed by lows the following morning in the 30s inland areas. South central Alaska, mostly in the lower to mid-40s, and upper 40s Kodiak Island. Lower to mid-40s Bristol Bay, and upper 40s to lower 50s for the southeast coast, followed by highs Thursday afternoon, call it 63 for the Craig-Klawak area, otherwise in the 50s. Lower 50s, interior Alaska, mid-50s Kodiak Island, and up north, lows 20s, about sums it up, from the Bettles area right up across the Brooks Range to the Arctic coast, and also for the Yukon Flats down into the mid-20s, as well as Eagle, down to Northway, otherwise in the 30s, milder out toward the Bering Strait, highs in the 40s to lower 50s, 53 for Fairbanks, 30s for the Brooks Range in the Arctic coast north slope, followed by lows again, Brooks Range on out in the 20s, northeast interior in the 20s as well as the eastern interior, otherwise 30 to 35, closer to 40 out west, followed by highs on Thursday, still a little warmer, edging up into the mid-50s for the Fairbanks and Nenana North Pole area. Otherwise in the 40s most everywhere else, into the lower 40s for the Brooks Range, and 30s for the North Slope and the Arctic coast. 40s for the lows tonight out southwest, highs 40s to lower 50s, lows upper 30s to lower 40s, followed by highs in the 40s to near 50.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, IFR for the central Arctic coast and North Slope, but from the Brooks Range southward into the central interior, VFR, except over toward Eagle there along the Yukon River. And then some VFR, Northern Cook Inlet, Eastern Copper River Basin, Northern Kuskokwim Valley, with marginal VFR becoming IFR there, Southern Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, across the Alaska Peninsula, and along the southwest coast. IFR St. Lawrence Island to St. Matthew Island, marginal for the Pribilofs. Another band of IFR, pretty narrow though, coming into Chimionat and then good VFR, AKwx to Unmak Island, Nikolsky area. And the Panhandle really improving over the northern portion there with VFR flying to Yakutat and southern Panhandle marginal. And then moving on to the Wednesday afternoon time frame, IFR back into the southern southeast coast, marginal VFR northward, Lynn Canal Glacier Bay. But Yakutat and part of the eastern North Gulf Coast stays VFR into the Copper River Basin. Some marginal VFR, south central Alaska with IFR, Montague Island there to Resurrection Bay, maybe up to Passage Canal. And also along the southwest coast, Nunivak, St. Lawrence Island, and still on the central Arctic coast and North Slope areas, with that VFR area shifting into Unalaska Island now and marginal VFR spreading over AKwx. And then for Thursday morning, IFR pushes eastward from Chimionat-Tudam Chitka Island. Good zone of VFR, though, to the east of that, right up to the Pribilofs, central eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, western Alaska Peninsula. You can see IFR covering the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, up into the southern Copper River Basin, Talkeetna Mountains, Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak, Bristol Bay, southwest interior, right up through the Bering Strait, and then wrapping back around to the central Arctic coast and North Slope with VFR in between. And for the afternoon, IFR for the Arctic coast and North Slope, and coming down around to near Kivalina, Point Hope, down to Shishmaref and Buckland. And along the southwest coast, IFR, including Nunivak Island, down to the western Alaska Peninsula. Still a zone of VFR there, Pribilofs, eastern Aleutians to AKwx, and then IFR farther to the west. IFR across south central Alaska, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound. IFR and marginal VFR for the Panhandle. Anaktuvik, marginal VFR for the day Wednesday. Adigan, VFR most of the time. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR at times, possible VFR at other times. Same thing for Rainy. For Windy, marginal VFR possible on the south entrance, otherwise looking pretty good through the pass and out the north entrance. Isabel, marginal VFR at times, VFR at other times, especially in the afternoon. For Mentasta, going VFR for the entire day Wednesday. Tanita, marginal VFR. Portage, marginal with IFR possible on the eastern entrance. Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, 4,000 feet, took a good jog to the south off the chart there, well south of the Aleutians, 2,000 feet into the southern Bering, but right through the central interior, 6,000 to 8,000 feet across the Panhandle. Excuse me. Icing. Areas of moderate rime icing with that front, in advance of the front, coming into the Kenai Peninsula, Barren Islands there into Kamishak Bay. Otherwise, light to isolated moderate rime icing covering the southwest interior up to the southern Seward Peninsula, Alaska Peninsula. Then some isolated moderate mixed icing possible over the southern Panhandle, but it'll mostly be light. And looking at the jet stream, northwest to southeast oriented trough, couple upper lows there, one over the Alaska Peninsula, giving south flow about 65 knots into Cook Inlet and western Alaska Range, 65 knots southwest, turn westerly along the Arctic coast. Stronger jet out toward Chimia, northwest 130 knots. And at 9,000 feet, northwest 40 to 45 knots there, across the eastern Bering Sea to the Alaska Peninsula. Southeast 55 knots on up into the northern Kenai Peninsula, Turnagain Arm area. And looking at 3,000 feet, 55 knot winds right across the southern Kenai Peninsula and the western North Gulf Coast. 45 knots blowing into Norton Sound, north 55 knots there just east of the Pribilofs, sweeping on down across the Alaska Peninsula. Turbulence, considerable moderate chop, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, Cook Inlet, on up into the southern Susitna Valley, Kuskokwim Valley, to the Nulato Hills, and then the Alaska Peninsula and Fox Islands. Look for considerable moderate chop there, as well as St. Lawrence Island. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Hello, I'm a GOES-R series weather satellite orbiting 22,000 miles above Earth. I can see a lot of cool stuff from up here, and I take pictures of it with my spiffy camera that has 16 different settings. I have such good eyesight, I can see clouds, snow, smoke, smog, and ash, so I can warn you about dangerous conditions and help you avoid them. When storms are brewing, I watch them closely and help with hurricane, tornado, and flood warnings to help keep you safe. And my lightning mapper tracks lightning strikes way up in the sky, even through dark, dense clouds. I also help with search and rescue missions. I listen for distress signals from emergency beacons and tell search and rescue teams just where to find people who need help. But even when I'm keeping a close eye on Earth, I'm monitoring weather out here in space, too. I watch the sun for big bursts of energy, which send waves of radiation toward Earth that can affect power grids, block communication with planes, cause errors in GPS, and damage satellites. Space weather is also very dangerous for astronauts working outside the International Space Station. I warn them so they can get inside where they'll be safe. So the next time you watch a weather report or check your phone for the forecast, remember, that's me. So look to the sky and wave. I'll be here. Whoa! Things are looking pretty bad down there. But don't worry. I'm going to give weather forecasters a heads up and help you stay safe. I'm a GOES-R series weather satellite, and one of my jobs is to keep an eye on Earth's weather as I orbit above. But I'm 22,000 miles above Earth. How does your local weather forecaster know what I see all the way up here? First, I have to figure out what's going on. I point my special camera at the Earth and take pictures of the clouds I see below. My pictures show where the clouds are, but I also take lots of other notes about the clouds. For example, how high they reach into the atmosphere, how much rain they might cause, and when a severe storm may be forming. But I can't keep all of this information to myself. I have to share it with weather forecasters down on Earth. A big antenna is waiting for my call. Since I'm a satellite, I send my pictures and notes in a computer language of ones and zeros. Luckily, the antenna speaks my language. Computers connected to the antenna organize my notes and combine all of the pictures and cloud information and translate them into weather maps. They send a version of the maps back up to me. I'll hold on to these for later. Another copy of the maps is split into smaller pieces. This helps the maps move faster from one place to another. The map pieces are then sent for processing before being sent back up in the sky to a communication satellite. From there, the maps are picked up by antennas at the National Weather Service forecast offices in each region. There are more than 100 offices. I also take the maps that I received and send them out to companies that specialize in making the maps more colorful and better for viewing on TVs and computers. The colorful maps and the maps from the forecast offices then go to your local weather forecaster. The forecaster combines the information from these maps with lots of other information, like model forecast data and radar data, to make predictions about the upcoming weather in your area. And that's how I help you find out if bad weather is going to ruin your afternoon plans. You're welcome. Soon it will be my time to shine. In outer space. I'm the GOES-R satellite. That stands for Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellite. And the R stands for my order in this series of weather satellites. Like my older siblings before me, I'll do a lot for watching weather, but I'm pretty special because I have a lot of new gadgets. I'm originally from Colorado, but my journey to space has a few stops along the way. I'll be shipped in a very special satellite shipping container to Kennedy Space Center. Moving me around is not easy. I'm over 18 feet wide and weigh 6,000 pounds. And then things get really exciting. I get loaded onto an Atlas V541 launch vehicle. A big rocket! Woo! After Atlas and I blast off together, my compartment separates from the launch vehicle and I continue to climb higher and higher. Then I break away completely and unfurl my solar panel and antenna. After that, I have to use my thrusters to get into just the right position, 22,000 miles above the ground and traveling 1.9 miles per second to keep up with Earth's rotation. And then I can officially start my job along with my fellow GOES sisters, where I take advanced pictures for more accurate weather forecasts, map lightning in real time, and improve the monitoring of the sun's activity. It's going to be so awesome! I can't wait!
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the coastal water forecast for the south coast, southeast winds 15 knots, 6-foot seas for the north coast there. East winds 15 to 20 knots, 6 to 8-foot seas. Clarence Strait looking at a southeast wind for Wednesday at 15 knots. Light northeast winds at 10 knots for Stevens Passage. North winds 15 knots for Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay. And for Thursday, for the inside waters, south winds 20 knots from Dixon Entrance to Lynn Canal with seas at 4 feet. Small craft advisories for the coast, south winds 25 knots with seas 9 to 12 feet. Prince William Sound, east winds 25 knots, seas 6 feet. Gale warnings for the North Gulf Coast for Wednesday, east winds at 35 knots. And storm warnings are out Wednesday for the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay, east winds 50 knots, seas 16 feet. Small craft advisories for Cook Inlet, northeast winds 30 knots with seas as high as 11 feet. And for Thursday, Cook Inlet, lighter winds, south to southeast 15 to 20 knots, seas coming down to about 6 feet. And for the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay and the western North Gulf Coast, look for southwest winds at 20 knots. Eastern North Gulf Coast, winds will be south at 20 knots, so seas just under 10 feet. And Prince William Sound, southeast winds 20 knots, seas 3 feet. For Kodiak Island, gale warnings, southeast winds 35 knots. Gale warnings for the Alaska Peninsula for southwest winds at 30 knots. On the Bering Sea side, Pacific side, northwest at 40. And Bristol Bay, southeast winds at 20 knots. And for Thursday, gale warnings for the Alaska Peninsula, all the way from Cape Sarachev up to Sitkinak, and the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, looking at west winds 35 knots and southwest 25 knots in the forecast for Kodiak Island on Thursday. Bristol Bay, small craft advisories, west winds 30 knots, seas just under 10 feet. And for the Unimak Island area, look for northwest winds at 30 knots, but gale warnings out for Unalaska Island, northwest 40 on Wednesday. Central Aleutians, northwest winds 20 knots, and then western Aleutians, southwest winds 25 knots. Big increase in the winds with that next big storm moving up just west of Shemya. South winds 60 knots with 36-foot seas there from Shemya to Kiska. Amchitka Island storm warning, south winds 50 knots. Adak and Atka south at 45, and Unimak Island southwest winds 40 knots. On Alaska Island, small craft advisories, west winds at 30 knots. For the southwest coast, Wednesday, north winds 30 knots. Same thing for St. Matthew Island, north 25 for St. Lawrence Island, and the Pribilofs, northwest winds 30 knots. And for the day on Thursday, gale warnings for the southwest coast, northwest winds 35 to 40 knots, west 30 knot winds for the Pribilofs, St. Matthew Island, and St. Lawrence Island, gale warnings for north winds at 35 knots. And up along the Arctic coast for Wednesday, east winds 20 knots all across the coastline there from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, northeast at 15, Cape Thompson to Wales, northeast at 20. And for Thursday, got some gale warnings there for the far eastern Arctic coast, say from Kaktovik, Barter Island to Demarcation Point, east winds at 35 knots. Otherwise, east 30 knots, and the central coast, northeast at 25. Western coast, lighter, northeast at 20. And then from Cape Beaufort to Wales, small craft advisories for north winds 25 knots, seas 6 to 7 feet. And for tonight again, up along the Arctic coast, continued breezy northeast winds 10 to 25 miles an hour with fog and flurries at times. Otherwise, next system pushes rain into Cook Inlet and the Kenai Peninsula, as well as Bristol Bay and into the southern Kuskokwim Valley and the southwest interior, as it starts to dry out over the Panhandle, but still a chance of showers in the southeast coast tomorrow. And look for rain to push into Prince William Sound and south central Alaska, especially on the eastern slopes of the terrain. That's where it'll be the heaviest. And wet for Kodiak Island, wet and windy for the eastern Aleutians. And then on Thursday, a couple of low complexes there, one near Shelikof Strait, another one over the southwest interior. Keep it wet and windy there over the eastern Bering Sea, Alaska Peninsula. And look for periods of rain, light rain, to continue in the North Gulf Coast. Big storm comes into the far western Bering Sea with storm force winds and rain heavy at times. Otherwise, the northern part of the state will be dry and
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.